In this chapter now, this is a chapter dealing with risk and return, which means we're dealing with statistics. And in this first problem that they ask us to work, they're going to give us the probability distribution for three different assets, assets F, G, and H. Now, what's going to go on now is I'm going to calculate the statistics for asset F, and in the next video, I'm going to give you the answers for G and H. And I'll let you work those out yourself. It'll be good for you to get the practice in doing that. But in this particular problem now, I'm going to work the statistics for asset F. Now this problem reads as follows. Three assets, F, G, and H, are currently being considered by Perth Industries. The probability distributions of expected returns for these assets are shown in the following table. So in your textbook now, they'll show you the probability distribution for each of the assets. The A part asks us to calculate the expected return. That's the mean of the distribution. B asks us to calculate standard deviation, which is a measure of risk. And C asks us to calculate the coefficient variation, which is your risk per unit of expected return. And so what we're going to do here initially now, I'm going to work the problem for asset F. And that's the problem that I will work in the next video. Again, I'm going to give you the answers to G and H. I'm going to let you work those yourself. Now, these first two columns that you see here, this is indeed the probability distribution for asset F. As a student, you should kind of know how to read a probability distribution. Not particularly complicated, but what this is telling us is that there's a 10% chance that the return of asset F in the next time period is going to be 40%. It's telling us there's a 20% chance that in the next time period the return of asset F is going to be 10%, a 40% chance it would be 0, a 20% chance it would be -5, and a 10% chance that would be -10. Now, when you calculate the mean of a probability distribution, you calculate what's known as a weighted average mean. So in this problem, we're going to take the observations, the returns, multiply them by the probability of occurrence, and then we're going to sum those products, that is, the result of all those multiplications that we did. So if we take 0.1 times 40%, we get 4. 0.2 times 10 is 2. 0.4 times 0 is 0. 0.2 times -5 is -1. And 0.1 times -10 is -1. This column right here now, these are the products. This is the result of us multiplying each observation by its probability of occurrence. And if we sum those observations, in this problem we get 4%. The mean of a probability distribution is often referred to as an expected value. Remember in an earlier video I told you risk was something other than the expected. And what you expect in the next time period is the mean of the distribution today. So in this case, what do we expect the return of asset F to be in the next time period? 4%. Okay, this is the mean of the distribution. The next thing we do now is we calculate the deviations from the mean. Now, deviation is the observation minus the mean. And these are the observations in this column. So 40 minus 4 is 36. 10 minus 4 is 6. 0 minus 4 is -4. -5 minus 4 is -9. And -10 minus 4 is -14. So what you see in this column, this is indeed the deviations from the mean. And again, recall in an earlier lecture now, we showed how returns move above and below the mean line. These two observations are above the mean line. Those are positive deviations. These observations are below the mean line. Those are negative deviations. And again, these are the deviations of the distribution. The first statistic we're going to calculate now, this is variance. Variance is defined as the mean of the squared deviations. So we're going to take the deviations for each observation here, square it, and then multiply it by its probability of occurrence. So for instance, 36 squared times 0.1 is 129.60. 6 squared is 36. Multiply that by 0.2 rather, you get 7.2. -4. Now, any number squared is a positive number. So -4 times -4, -4 squared, that's going to be 16. And we're going to multiply that by 0.4, and we get 6.40. -9 squared is 81. Multiplied by 0.2, you get 16.20. And -14 squared times 0.1, we get 19.6. So these are the products here. And again, if we sum the products, we get the mean of the squared deviations in this case, which turns out to be the variance of the distribution, which is 179. Now, again, from an earlier lecture, variance has no unit value. This is not 179%, it's not 179 horses, it's not 179 anything, just sort of an absolute value. And what you say about variance is the greater the variance, the greater the risk. Okay, the smaller the variance, the smaller the risk. But again, has no unit value. To give a unit value, we find the square root of the variance, and that's known as standard deviation. So if you take 179, find the square root of that, you're going to get 13.3791. And standard deviation now, it takes on the same unit value as the observations. So the observations were in percentage. That means that the standard deviation is also in percentage. So 13.3791% is the standard deviation of this distribution. The next statistic we're going to calculate, this is the coefficient of variation. It's defined as your risk per unit of expected return. It's the standard deviation divided by the mean. Standard deviation is 13.3791. The expected return, the mean of this distribution is 4. So if you take 13.3791 and divide it by 4, you get 3.3448. And that's your coefficient of variation. And this is your risk per unit of expected return. The way you interpret this now, you're saying that you're taking on 3.3448 units of risk, 3.3448 units of standard deviation for every 1% of return that you get. All things being equal, you want to be a rational investor. You want the most return for the least amount of risk. So what you want to look for, if you're comparing assets, you indeed want to find the asset that has the lowest coefficient of variation. That's going to give you the least amount of risk for each unit of return that that asset gives you. This is asset F. In the next video now, I'm going to give you the answers to assets G and H, and we'll kind of talk about some of the relationship between these different assets and which assets you want to choose if you had to choose between these assets.